Hello, everybody, and good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, whenever you are watching this. This is video 3 in my dream series. And so I'm Chara Harris, and you are on my channel, Chara Harris Online. Welcome back. This is where I talk about Bible, faith, and beauty. And in this video, it's taking off where I left off in part 2. In part 2 of the dream series, I went through Genesis 20, 28, and Genesis 31, and specifically talked about where God talked to different people in dreams in those chapters. And now we're moving ahead to one of my favorite accounts in the Bible. I love Joseph's story in the Old Testament. So get your pen, get your paper, get your notebook, get your coffee. I've got my chai latte tea here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to start in Genesis 37, and this is after, let's see. All right. So this is when Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. So I remember Jacob, we kind of left off in 31. I mean, there's some things that happened in between, but in Genesis 31, we got Jacob leaving Laban, taking his family and moving out, if you just want the full overarching story. So now it just focuses on just the son of Joseph, which is the son by Rachel, who Jacob really loved, right? He was tricked into marrying Leah. That's a whole nother story. I want to do a video about Leah as well. But this is Joseph. So Joseph was favored. He's one of the, he was not the youngest because he had Joseph and he had Benjamin by Rachel. The older brothers were jealous of Joseph because the dad kind of doted on him because that's the wife he loved, that's the son he loved, right? So like I said, Jacob had his issues, but he's human like the rest of us, right? All right, so we get going with Joseph. So if we go to, I am in Genesis 37. I'm starting in verse 5. And again, I'm reading from the New Living Translation because it's a just kind of plain English and easier to read through. But I usually start in with the New King James Version. Um, and then I usually switch to the New Living Translation. All right. So here we go. So Genesis 37, verse 5. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more than ever. Oh gosh. So listen to this dream, he said. We were out on the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed down low before mine. And his brothers responded, so you think you're going to be our king, do you? Do you actually think you reign over us? And they hated him all the more because the dreams and the way he talked about them. So there's a lesson in there too, that sometimes what God be showing us, you don't have to share it with everybody. Just that's a whole other lesson right there. So we got the grain and we got that. The second lesson, that's mini lesson that's in here, is that Joseph's brothers they also had the gift of interpretation, right? Because if someone would have told me this dream years ago about bundles, I would have been like, okay, what does it have to do with some grain? I would have been like, okay, what does grain mean? Like, and have to look it up. His brothers knew exactly what God was saying in their dream. So that means they had the gift of interpretation. And they were so into not liking Joseph, they didn't even realize what the gifts that they had. But anyway, there's a video on that. I think I did a short or either a video on that. It's on my, I don't know if it's on my YouTube channel. I know it's on my Instagram, but I did a video on that as well because they instantly knew what the dream meant, right? So that was dream one. He had two dreams. So we're in verse 9. So soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I had another dream. He said, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and to bow to the ground before you? And then I'm gonna stop there. So again, even Joe, we know Joseph could have had talked to because God talked to him in dreams earlier in Genesis, right? So even the dad, Jacob, um, could interpret dreams, right? So there was no questionings, like they knew exactly what was being said in the dream. And Joseph did too, but Joseph being a teenager telling all his business when you probably shouldn't have been telling it. So at this time, Joseph was, in his New Living Translation said he was around 17 years old. So he was a teenager at this time, right? So you know the story. Joseph's brothers put him in a pit, then they sold him into slavery. And anyway, long story, Joseph ends up in prison. And this is the next time we have Joseph in dreams. So we're going to move along to Genesis chapter 40. And this is when Joseph is in the prison and now he's interpreting other people's dreams. But before we go there, let me back up, right? Because I said I was going to go through each chapter and talk about the theme. So in 37, we got very prophetic dreams, right? And even revelation to a certain extent. But definitely prophetic. Definitely God is telling him that you're going to be a leader, you're going to be a ruler, you're going to be a king, you're going to be something over other people where they're bowing down to you. So there's no timetable with it. There's nothing. It's just this is what God told him that's going to happen somewhere in the future. So we have a prophetic dream. Um, yes, which is also a theme in the other dreams when he talked to Jacob. It was kind of prophetic, like he was confirming the promise that he gave to Abraham to Jacob, and now we got a prophetic dream here with Joseph. So we're going to move on to Genesis 40. So I'm gonna go there. Let me scoot down and find it. Okay, here we go. So Genesis 40. So this is when Joseph is in prison. If you don't know why he's in prison, just go read Joseph's story. He has an amazing story and how God was with him through all of the hardship and everything because God made that promise in a dream. And even though it didn't come to pass right away, God was still with him. It's a beautiful story. Um, and so we're in Genesis 40, and I'm gonna start in, let me see. Verse 5. And so at this time, Pharaoh became angry with two of his officials. It was the cupbearer and the baker. And he put them in prison with Joseph. Now, at this time, Joseph was actually like kind of in charge of people in the prison. So, but that's a whole nother underlying story. Again, you're going to get so much out of Joseph's story. So he was kind of like in charge. So while they were in prisons, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked very upset. And he said, "Why do you look worried today?" And they replied that they both had dreams and no one can tell us what they mean. And then Joseph says, "Well, interpreting dreams is God's business." So he knew he got that gift from God. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. He says, "In my dream, I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had three branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup and then placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And then Joseph interprets, this is what the dream means, Joseph said. The three branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to the position as his chief cupbearer. And then Joseph, please remember me and do a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it. So then the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation. He said to Joseph, "I had a dream too. In my dream, there were three baskets of white pastries or bread stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries of Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head." And Joseph, this is what the dream means. The three baskets also represent 3 days. The 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. The birds will come and peck away at your flesh. Whoa, right? I'm sure that is not what the chief baker was expected to get as an interpretation of that dream. Uh, but there you have it. So it goes on to say that what happened, what Joseph interpreted the dreams as happening is exactly what happened. He restored the cupbearer to his former position, and then the Pharaoh killed the baker. So I don't know what the baker did, but he did something and got in there and he got executed. And Joseph was right on point, right? and gave the glory to God, was like, God is the interpreter of dreams. All right. So then he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Now there's 2 years that goes. Remember when he interpreted these dreams, he asked, I know he asked the cupbearer, he asked him like, remember me when you're restored and things are going good because I'm not supposed to be in this place and all this stuff, right? And so 2 years passed though. They totally forgot about him. And isn't that kind of like human nature, right? Someone does something good for you and then you kind of forget about them. But he forgot about him. So 2 more years passed. But then Pharaoh has a dream. And then that's when the cupbearer was like, hey, there's this Hebrew boy, young man that's down in the prison that interpreted my dream. Maybe we can call him up and interpret your dream. So we're going to move on to Genesis 41, the next chapter that talks about uh, Pharaoh's dream. And so, all right. So I'm in Genesis 41, and I'm starting in verse 1. So 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw seven fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and began grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw seven more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny and thin cows ate the seven healthy fat cows. And at this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. But he fell back asleep and he had a second dream. This time he saw seven heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then seven more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind. And these thin heads swallowed up the seven plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up and realized it was a dream. So Pharaoh was disturbed, right? He's like, what does this mean? It's vivid and it happened twice, right? So the next morning he was disturbed. He called all of his magicians and wise men, and no one could say anything. But then the cupbearer spoke out and said, hey, I was been reminded of my failure. Some time ago, you were angry with me and imprisoned me. And there was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. And we told him our dreams, and he told us what each dream meant, and everything happened. He's like, I'm restored, and the baker got executed, right? So Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he quickly was brought out from the prison. So then Pharaoh comes up. So tells Joseph the dream, and Joseph responded, and he said, both dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The seven healthy cows and the seven healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The seven thin, scrawny cows that came up and the seven thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. So the next 7 years are going to be prosperity, and after there will be 7 years of famine. So anyway, the story goes on to Joseph even saying, telling Pharaoh like, telling the Pharaoh like what should be done, like what should you do um, in the time of plenty, and then to get ready for the famine. And then Pharaoh kind of realizes, well, you got the best idea, you know how to do this, and he instills Jacob as governor of Egypt. From the prison, y'all, he went from the prison to the second in command of Egypt, and everybody listened to what he did. So he's gonna save like a lot of people during the famine. So anyway, so I'm gonna stop there for the day, but I'm gonna go back over really quick. So we have in Genesis 37, when Joseph was a teenager, we've got God giving him a prophetic dream about him being a leader and people bowing down to him, right? Then years later, he's in the prison and he interprets some dreams that are very symbolic, right? Those dreams were uh, symbolic and they gave revelation for the chief baker and the chief cupbearer. And both everything that Joseph said came true from those dreams, right? So then the Pharaoh has a dream that is symbolic, but he knew it was trying to say something, and so he calls for Joseph. Joseph interprets the dreams, and then he actually gets restored as governor because he knew what was going to happen and to plan for it. So all of those dreams I feel like were very like prophetic as to what's going to happen in the future. So that was that theme there. So we will pick up in Genesis 42. It's really short in Genesis 42. I can do that before I leave. So in 42, he didn't have a dream, but that's when Joseph first saw his brothers, and then he remembered like his brothers' reaction to his dream. And then he accused them of being spies and things like that. And that's a whole nother story of like redemption and forgiveness and things like that with Joseph and his brothers. But I just wanted to point out that like he remembered his dreams as a teenager and how his brothers reacted to them. So I'm going to end there for part three. In part four, we're going to start in Judges and then Samuel. And we're going to talk about some dreams in those parts of the Bible that this is the new parts for me as well. So I hope you are enjoying the series. I hope you are writing down these verses and going back and doing your own study and letting God speak to you and give you revelation about things. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.